So, should you buy a Chinese truck? These WPL Heng trucks have been out for a while. There's already some clones of them, and there's a lot of discussion on them on Facebook groups and forums, and they're affordable. They're really affordable. To be honest, these are what got me back into RC. When I was younger, high school, RC was my life. But, back then, I had no major responsibilities, and I mowed lots of lawns. I used eBay and traded RC car parts on eBay like it was a stock market. I'd buy them up when they were, when there was a ton of a particular vehicle on the market. I'd buy wrecks, pull them apart, clean up the parts, and resell them as spares. Made a lot of money that way. I had a lot of disposable income to spend on RCs. It wasn't uncommon for me to put $400, $500, $600 into an RC. But, life happens. I don't have that kind of money now. So when I saw these WPL vehicles coming out for $35, $40 a piece, I understood that the quality wasn't going to be what I expected, but they looked good. And even with modifications, they were in my budget. So I picked up one of these B1s. Now, if you read Facebook groups talking about these, or if you read the reviews on any site that sells them, you're going to see the full gamut of positive and negative reviews. Some people say that they're just absolutely not worth it, that they break too easy, that the quality is really low. And you have other people that absolutely love them. And it's very subjective. One of the things I want to say is that for these vehicles, what do you want them for? What type of driver are you? Because if you're the person that likes to go fast and jump things and bash around, these are not the vehicles for you. Not at all. Being in the $35, $40 range, 60 for some of the bigger six-wheel drives, they have to meet a certain price point. The component quality is not fantastic, but they do have a huge aftermarket. And that's another point, a fair point that people raise on a lot of these groups, is that, well, if you have to put a bunch of aftermarket parts into it, therefore turning it into a much more expensive vehicle before it's a good vehicle, then what's the point? Well, like I said, in my particular case, that doesn't bother me at all, because the upgrades are cheap too, and I can do things over time, and I enjoy the process of tinkering far more than the final result. This truck right here has spent more time being worked on than actually driven. And that's okay with me, because I get as much enjoyment out of that as I do of actually taking them out and driving. And frankly, I don't have that much opportunity to take them out and drive them anyways. But I've got to kind of roll back to who these were originally built for. And I'll try to link it in the description below, but there's actually an interview with the guys that originally created WPL and got it under the Heng name. So, step outside for a second. They were fans of these. So, these 1/16 scale tanks. This is a project tank I have. Just ignore the dust and the tape and all this. I actually got this from a thrift store, and I'm in the process of restoring it right now. So, Heng creates these tanks, and they were created as like a cheaper alternative to Tamiya tanks. They're in the same scale. They're nowhere near as expensive as Tamiya tanks are. Like, these tanks, they're about $100. They're decently detailed. Everything works really well. And so these guys wanted to have trucks that match their vehicles. So they created that. You know, they're very scale looking. The drive shafts are missing out of this one because I actually stole them for a different project. But they were designed to move realistic speeds on the fields it meets with these. And then moving on from there, they created these, the C series. These are designed to be little affordable rock crawlers. There's a lot of aftermarket stuff on here. So this doesn't quite what they look like out of the box, but the drive shafts in these are a huge, huge weak point, but I'll get to that in a minute. The reason I have these 3 trucks here is I wanted to show the different types. The B series, straight frame rails, leaf springs. Again, don't take my trucks as a perfect example of them because they're tweaked, they're modified. The C series, they went with a 4-link. The 4-link suspension is plastic. This is aftermarket parts. And then this one over here is actually neither. This is actually the same chassis as this truck, cut down, shortened a little bit, with a New Bright body on it. Also a project, not glued together. But the reason I bring this one up is that this brings an affordable level to RC, or an introductory point to modifying RCs, because I got one of these, a B1 kit, or not a kit version, the ready-to-run version with these toyish controllers for like 20 bucks on a Banggood fire sale, and found this New Bright Jeep toy with no controller at the thrift store. Bought it for like $2. Felt no guilt cutting up the B1 to make that. That project, even if I include paint, I'm into it. Maybe 30 bucks so far. I'm not done with it yet. I gotta do more detail, finish painting it and all that, but it costs pennies to modify and play with these compared to your normal 1/10 RCs. I mean, you know, anyone that's been in the RC hobby for a while knows that it's not unrealistic to throw $1,000 into a vehicle over time. This Jeep, or this Toyota, even with all the aftermarket parts on it, I'm probably not even into it 120 bucks. I would divide hobbyists into 3 groups: racers, bashers, and scalers. Racers are the people that want to go fast. Performance is the only thing that matters. These aren't the trucks for you. Bashers, you want to have fun, go airborne, you know, jump around in a skate park, crash into things. These are probably not the trucks for you. But if you like the scale, or if you are if you're into how a truck looks, how it looks on the shelf as much as it looks rolling, and you want something that looks somewhat realistic out on the trail, or if you're looking for a mini crawler to go play with on your brakes, these might be the trucks for you. If you are driving around your living room, driving it around your yard, you probably don't even need to do any modifications. If you want to take it out and run it on the same trails as your 1/10s, you might need to do a little bit of modifications, but let's be honest. Even if you put all the aftermarket parts you could need into one of these, you're still going to probably spend less than you would for 1 or 2 upgrades for a 1/10 scale. So it's subjective. It really is. It should be noted too that there's also a really good community behind these online. If you look around YouTube, there's a lot on modifying these. If you get on look through Facebook, there's several groups all about these trucks. People do some amazing work with them. I do want to note one thing about scale. We're going to move this one out of the picture altogether because this body isn't even off of one of these stock trucks. But generally people say these are 1/16 or 1/14 scale, and I'd say that's close enough. And they work with like G.I. Joe action figures quite well. You can see that in an earlier video of mine. If we look close in here, we've got one of the Star Wars figures and a Schleich fox standing on the seat. Come on, focus. Focus. But if you've ever seen these vehicles in real life, you know they shouldn't really be this close in size. I would say that these are probably much closer to 1/16, which is fine. That matches these tanks, like I said before. But as with many RCs, they kind of adapt the bodies to fit the chassis. So without having to retool the axles, because despite the difference in suspension, these are the same exact axles in these. Come on, focus camera. So they warp the scale a little bit to match. This is probably a little closer to like maybe 1/13 or 1/12 scale. Physically bigger. Does it really matter? Not really. I don't think we have that many rivet counters in the RC hobby. Maybe a few more in the model tank or RC tanks than in the scale crawling and stuff like that. But I think most of us care about the overall realism than perfectly matching numerical scales. Let's talk about quality real fast. And this is another probably one of the more pointed issues here. So it's well known that every once in a while the kit versions come with a couple of pieces missing. Now, if you get them from a good seller, usually those sellers will send you the part, a replacement part, no question asked, because they understand that it happens. The body design on these trucks is beautiful. If you're used to something like Tamiya models, the bodywork very similarly well done, high detailed, excluding a few weird things like they tried to make these mirrors out of a harder to break plastic, so they're a little bit springy and weird and they get a little warped. Same thing with the wipers. Sometimes you have to heat them up and lay them down. But overall, the bodywork is fantastic on these. When you get underneath, it's a slightly different story. But they are using stamped steel frame rails, so that's a bonus. These frame rails on the C series, they're out of a flat piece, kind of very similar to a, kind of reminds me a lot of like Meccano or Erector set type metal. And they seem a little flexible out of the package if you're building a kit, but once they're all together, they're actually quite strong, surprisingly strong for what they are. On these C14s, these links are plastic, and the axle bridges, or these 4-link components, are plastic, and those are kind of a weak link on them. Your mileage may vary. It seems like they've used a couple of different types of plastic. There's a very good chance that because of the way things work in China, you might buy 2 of these models and they might have been manufactured in 2 different plants. You know, we don't really have any way of guaranteeing that one truck's not just a super good clone of the other. But I actually didn't have any problems with my links. I did not break any. The bridge, or the 4-link thing, I did, but only after putting this aftermarket gearhead motor. It's kind of like a gear-reduced industrial motor like you might see in an electric drill or something, in a 3D printed transmission. And this is slow compared to the factory transmission, but it puts out a lot of torque. And I had already put these steel links in and I got myself in trouble. I wedged the car between two sticks and forgot that this wasn't a 1/10 scale and tried to get unstuck and, well, snapped the bridges. Some people have said that these things are super, super fragile. Like, they drive them the first time and break them, and I can see that happening, but I also have to question your driving a little bit, to be honest. But again, it's subjective. What type of a driver are you? I've done all these upgrades not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. But I will say, one of their weak points is these plastic drive shafts. Notice I don't have any in this truck, and let's bring the Jeep back in. This Jeep still has them. These drive shafts, they're made of ABS. Most of the plastic in these is a form of ABS. And ABS is not an ideal material for high stress, thin applications like this. And notably, it's a little more severe in this Jeep because I've shortened it by, I think, a little under half an inch. But the drive shaft angles are high, and that contributes. Like I said, unfinished project, not everything screwed together. In fact, the chassis just held to the body by poster tack, blue tack. But these drive shafts, they are a weak point. If you're going to replace anything in these, bare minimum upgrade, get rid of the drive shafts. They're just not good. They crack easily. One thing I will say is if you're going to replace them, don't use these drive shafts. They work okay. I haven't broke them yet, but they look great. They don't work so well. This truck I set up with the steel axle kits and those drive shafts before there was an actual Heng Long kit that includes the CVD style drive shafts and their own steel and brass axle internals. It's a cheap upgrade. It's like $35 for these. But again, you buy this kit version of this truck for about $40. Put $40 into the drivetrain. Maybe get some electronics. You're still building a decent little rig to play around for less than $100. So, I guess quit whining and have fun? I don't know. One quick note about the differences between the kit versions of these and the pre-built versions. So, the pre-built versions, they come with a radio like this. They have a control board that's very similar to like what you would see in a toy store RC car, just a basic single board. Now these are 2.4 gigahertz. No actual antenna. Some of them have dummy antennas, but the biggest differences between the kit and the pre-built. This one I got as a kit. Both B1s I got as pre-builts. There's very little difference in price. Generally, it's a couple bucks. The price difference is easier to make up by finding a different seller than picking for price alone. It's irrelevant. The kit versions have softer tires, which if you're intending to run it as like a kinetic model, who cares? But like for this one where it's actually out in rock crawling, that does matter. But you can also buy the soft tires aftermarket. They're like $6, something like that. Something really low. But the kit versions come with a servo. Like an actual servo like you're used to from normal RC cars, and no other electronics. The pre-built versions have a thing, and I can't even call it a servo. It's a motor gearbox thing, a little swing arm, but it doesn't know where it is, and this is not proportional. You see, it's basically just a 3-position switch, on, off, or off, on. It makes the most horrible grinding noise. The steering is sudden, and it makes this sound like it's grinding meat or something. It's functional, but it's terrible sounding. A lot of people complain that it burns out really, really easy. And something I'll say is, for the one that I have here that does still have it, if you're holding the steering to one side a lot, you're gonna burn it up. I mean, it's a terrible system. I'd say if you already have RC gear, just get the kit versions. They both have creative solutions. All the various ones have creative solutions for where to store the battery. This actually slides up underneath the driver's seat on this one, and the B1s and some of the other bigger trucks, it's under the hood. I definitely prefer driving with this to this. If you look around on some of the same sites that sell these, you could find ESCs for about $10-12 that are more than adequate for these, and receivers. For those of you using FR Sky equipment, I'll show you a little receiver I like. It works really good for these trucks. Let's see, this is the XMR 8-channel or 6-channel micro receiver. One thing about this is you gotta like to solder if you want to run in these. So these work a little different than your normal receivers. They, as you can see, there's no plugins. So you cut the plug off your ESC or your servo, and you solder the data wire to one of the channel slots. Positive goes to one side and ground goes to the other. These are just buses. You solder all the wires to them. Why I use these? Well, these trucks aren't very big. These fit absolutely anywhere in there. And they're cheap. I think I pay $8 or $9 a piece for these. I just buy several of them at a time. I have these in almost all of my trucks. And I'll probably be putting them in these tanks as well, because why not? You could order a bunch of female pigtails and just solder them all onto this manually if you really wanted to. But one of the reasons why I use that many extra channels instead of a pistol grip is, well, these are military vehicles, and military vehicles can have all kinds of options if you're willing to do a little building. And one of their factory options is this. And this is a 2-speed transmission assembly, which comes with its own little micro servo for shifting. And that can go on to a 3rd channel if you got a 3-channel pistol grip, or any of the channels on something like this.